Back on this little power supply. I sort of shoved it under the bench after getting it going or testing it, and didn't think too much more about it. Then I started thinking it probably would be handy to actually have a dual tracking power supply, since I haven't really got anything else that does it. And all it really needed was a bit of a cleanup, so I removed the front panel, which was a bit of fun since it was all corroded together, and I've just left a lot of the switches just poked through, thankfully. And I've given it basically sanded it down to get rid of the worst of the corrosion. You can still see a little bit of pitting here. Painted it white in the handles, so I thought that's got to look a lot better. And while I'm at it, hopefully this meter's still working. The knob wouldn't come off because of the grub screw, so what a shame that horrible old Bakelite knob got chopped in half with the bolt cutters to get rid of it. Only way I could get it off, I'm thinking of putting a new potentiometer in there, even though this one was working to a degree, 10k. Might get rid of that little switch that they added. I think that's the one, yeah, they've added across the potentiometer. I might just delete that completely. The power switch, again, all corroded and horrible. You might be able to patch it up, but I think I'll just replace that as well. And the other one for the output, and probably these output terminals, binding post things, want getting rid of. And those other two connections were for the meter. And I did manage to pop that LED off, though it was just rammed through the hole in the front there. Very hard to get out. I thought it broke when it came out, but it didn't. Had to put a heap of force with a pair of pliers and just squeeze between the panel and the end of this and push it out, so it's probably got some marks on it, although it seems to be alright. But that's pretty weak old LED, and someone's just left the whole leads on there, so I think we'll chuck that old 70s LED away and upgrade that to something a bit better. Maybe tidy up this mains wiring a bit. I personally would have put a 3-way terminal block there, put the transformer to there, and then ran 2 longer leads to the switch, because it's not a good idea having mains cables floating around. Should be routed away from these capacitors and stuff, and keep everything as safe as possible and segregated between mains primary and all the secondary low voltage stuff. So that's not great circuit construction there. What do we got here? A bit of string tied around some insulation tape to join those 2 wires together as well. So I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to cable tie some of this stuff. It's just wires run wherever they want. Not the end of the world, but I may even tidy that up a bit. But the main thing is here, get this front panel back on. Must have gone that way around, I guess. I guess I better change the components first before I start putting things back together. I'll give this meter a bit of a clean up. I got the worst of the dust off it, so I think that'll look a lot better. I used to have one we made at TAFE, just an 0 to 30 volt variable power supply, and that was in a white case and didn't look too bad. And I've got to get some labels for other stuff, a labelling machine, so I might get that and just make some black on white labels and stick them on here. You could use the old like Letraset or something we used to have back in the day. I'm not sure if they have equivalent of that now, but something like that you just rub on, and then you've got to put a little bit of lacquer over it so it doesn't get scraped off. But I think probably one of those Dymo or what's the other brand, label makers will probably do the job. Won't look 100% probably, but I'll try them out. I guess you can probably cut those labels down, or you can get very thin tape for them, I think. And they're already laminated, so that might be the go. So I think we'll start by, this. I think I might see if I can put a 3-way terminal block there. What sort of job have they done on the mains cord? Not the best, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Oh, the other thing, this plug's all corroded, and it's got a very long cord on it, so maybe I should cut that down and put a new plug on it. Or I don't think it's worth putting a whole new power cord in there. That one seems to be in pretty good nick. And this mains wiring, I would like to have all that out of the way. What do they see? Another wire here going through all the main stuff back to back to one of the regulators. So very poor sort of safety when you've got these 2 wires on the secondary right up against the mains connections. And chances are it's never going to cause a problem, and it's not like a rat can get in here and chew the wires, which was the main reason in buildings they keep things segregated, because if a rat chews through them, or someone puts a nail or screw through things, there's a chance of it shorting low voltage to high voltage. Certainly has happened in the past. It's not really an issue with this sort of thing, but it would be nice to make it a bit tidier. Almost could do with a little circuit board to replace all this point-to-point wiring stuff, but it's kind of cool that it's still made in the old school way, I guess. A proper homemade job. They didn't even worry about the Electronics Australia circuit board. Yeah, it's got great big overrated resistors, 1 watt is probably all they had. But yeah, I might get rid of their little modification. I don't know if I should leave that or not. I've got plenty of toggle switches, so I guess in some ways it wouldn't hurt, but it doesn't really do anything useful to me. And I think I've got some more binding posts that I sorted out the other day. So I'll get all those unsoldered and replaced. And yeah, we'll go from there. Yeah, I've just had a thought with the mains cord. I might even pull it through, since it's so long anyway. And I'll just strip the insulation, the grey insulation, the sheath right back, and then I can just run this active wire all the way to the front switch. And then we'll just have the switch come back and the neutral to the 2 positions on this terminal block, save having to replace that. And we'll put the transformer to the other side of the terminal block. That way it's nice and neat. No silly joiners floating around in the breeze. Get rid of this horrible, I bet that's not even insulated to 240 volt standard, that cable. And yeah, we'll have an active wire, can come straight to here. I can probably even cut another bit of active wire out of the same cord and run it back to the terminal block, so it's all definitely in that like V105 temperature rated and voltage rated cable, because really you shouldn't go just using hookup wire with 240 volts, because you should get something that's probably only rated at 100 volts or 60 volts or something. Some of that stuff I think it was only 30 volts, so it's fine for all this other stuff, but not for your mains wiring ideally. And probably doesn't have very thick insulation on it, so that's another thing I'll do for safety's sake. So I might get in and sort this mains cord out first, and then yeah, get a new switch on here, directly wired to the cord on one side, and a bit of the proper brown cable back to the other position. Get the transformer into that socket, into that terminal block. I mean, it almost wants that terminal block. I might even move that back a bit, so it's away from these other wires, or move these wires. Well, these I guess can be rerouted. Yeah, better off going across those caps or something. Yeah, it's nice to leave a bit of a distance there, just for safety's sake, even though, like I say, probably nothing's ever going to disturb it, but it's good practice when you're building stuff. Keep your mains completely separate from all other wiring, all other components and stuff, just in case something gets hot and melts through or something. You just never know. Okay, so I've got this wire stripped off. I actually decided now I might just solder it straight to the transformer itself, because the pins on there are actually tin if I just put some heat shrink over it. So I'm just hooking this earth back up. They actually had the earth with a little eyelet on it under the aluminium clamp they held the cable with, which I don't think is probably ideal, so I might just put this under the bolt holding the transformer, because then at least it's bolted to the most likely part, if not the only part that's ever going to have failed insulation, which is the transformer itself. And that's a good, more solid sort of mechanical mounting there. Might even just bend those little bits over that are meant to sort of crimp it on there. I think I'll put that down under this brass bolt here that holds the transformer. Neutral can go straight on here, but I'll put a bit of heat shrink on there, tin that up, just to make sure that can't touch the transformer. That's already got this layer of insulating material here, and I think there's one on the other side here. I can see those pins are well insulated. And this other active will go straight to the switch. It's actually Pirelli Ericsson cable. I think they used to make this stuff in Australia. Don't think it says anything on the outside of it, but those wires have, or at least the active does, as it's stamped on there. So I'll get another bit of active wire to run back to there. Get that all insulated. Then we just got the active and its return wire to the switch. And I think good practice again is where this switch goes on the front panel to insulate those two bits as well. The other good practice is instead of having your active come into the middle pin, put it on the bottom or top, depending which way the switch. I guess when these are down it'll be the upper one. But if you have the active come into there, then when the switch is in the off position, it's not connecting to the other terminal or making that live, which if it's on the middle one, of course, double pole or double throw switch, didn't need to be a double pole, but a double throw switch will switch to either side. So it's just another little thing you can do just to make it slightly safer, and I'll put some heat shrink again over those, I think, just to cover them up. Don't think many people will be inside here fiddling around, but it's always nice for safety's sake to have those live connections covered up, so if someone's working on it, they're not likely to just, you know, fiddle around and put your little finger or something on live terminals. I've gone through a drawer of old LEDs I've got, some new, some used, plenty of them. And then I got to thinking, oh, they don't really fit in that old hole, so I get some of these little plastic bezel things you could get that you poke them in. And then I thought, well, I've actually got some of these fancy chrome ones, LED and a chrome holder, so that would actually be much more fitting with that era. So I think I'll drill the hole out and put one of them in there. That'll probably look the part. And I doubt I'm ever going to use these for anything anyway, so might as well poke one in here and see what it looks like. So after a bit of fiddling around, I've got the wiring a lot neater. I've actually replaced some of it. Now we've actually got black and red wires where they should be, so it makes it a little bit easier to follow. About the only wire that was the right colour was this green one, which is sort of the common. Put some new binding posts on it. I didn't have a green one, so I went for a white one, which is good enough, I think. So you've got your positive, negative and white. Nice new knob. I put a new potentiometer on, new on-off switch for the output, new on-off switch for the whole thing, new LED. Clean the meter up, cleaned some of the case up a bit. It came up surprisingly good just by giving it a wipe. I think that's part of the old price tag or something there. That needs a bit more of a clean. Got the handles and front panel attached to it again, so I guess it's time to plug it in and hope nothing goes bang, nothing smokes and everything works. I think there's a couple of bits of insulation still in there. I still haven't put a new mains plug on it yet, but I guess we might as well give it a go. Ooh, the LED lights up, so at least I got that right. Output's on. Oh, this meter's still a bit, possibly a bit diggy. Oh, we don't seem to have any varying going on. But let's just measure it. Hopefully I've got that pot hooked up the right way. Oh, that's right across, 34 volts. It's dropping but not fully. There we've got 17. Oh, interesting. So we've got one rail. Yeah, that's what it went up to. It was 5 to 15 volts. So the negative rail seems to be working. And varying, so the pot's definitely connected up alright, up to 20 volts. But the positive, on the other hand, is stuck. So if I hook that up to the wrong, that's the output of the voltage regulator. No, I think it's in the right spot. Or is something wrong with that regulator? So that's in, that's out, and I didn't touch the yellow wire, which is the vary one. But I'd say something's wrong with that. Something wrong with that op amp there. So the in voltage, 20 volts. Oh, don't tell me it's now working. Uh-oh. Okay, now this is getting crazy. What the hell? That just worked. And now it doesn't work. It was down to 5 volts. What the? We've got something dicky here somewhere. Turn it right down. Oh, here we go. We're varying again. Oh, God. Yep, so it's working now. So we've got something dicky on that board. Ah, oh, Jesus. That'd be right. So it's not a wiring error or anything. I didn't think I made any wiring errors. There's a dicky whatever. Yeah, look at that. There we go, 17, and it's gone. Ah! Is the chip not pushed in properly? It probably wasn't. It didn't look the best. I said it's possible with a bit of that corrosion. Maybe it's got to the IC socket or something. I saw it flick then a bit. Yeah, there. You little... So we've got a dry joint or something. Yeah, that got it going. Yeah, now we lost it. I press on that resistor. That's literally what seems to... No, now it's not doing anything. I mean, it's got to be one of these internal connections. Yes, so clearing that bit of solder seems to have made it rock solid now. So I'm not sure where that came from, whether I got it on there or whether it was something that was already there, but it must have just been hanging on in a weird way, and depending how you flex the board, it was just enough to touch on the track next to it. Back to, well, nearly 20 volts now. I don't know if it even went quite that high before, but... And 5 volt minimum, back to the basically the regulator doing what it's meant to do. And we should have the equivalent in negative. That one actually goes slightly above 20 volts. We've got a slight little tracking error there, not much. That's why, that's for some reason it's slightly above 5 volts negative at the minimum setting. So that's an interesting one. Yeah, we still got 0.2 volts there seemingly. In should just be 20 whatever volts. Okay, that's interesting. So we might have a slight little problem there. I guess it would be the wiper of the pot, wouldn't it? Which is at 0. I just measured 0 volts there. What the hell? In wasn't 0 before. Don't think I've got another intermittent fault. Oh. It's more like my leader's falling out. That's what's intermittent about that. Always make sure your multimeter's still connected. Guess when I move it up like that, it's dropping off. But I seem to be right about the 0 volts there. Whoops, something just moved the chassis. 0.2 volts there. 0 going into that op amp from the wiper of the pot, yet it's got a slight voltage there on its output, so that's not perfect. That's giving us that little 0.4 volt difference there, which I think is something like what it was at the top end as well, so that's interesting. I'm not sure if I took much notice last time of how accurate the tracking was, but there's something out. Could be something to do with the regulator, but I doubt it would be putting a... Well, it could be, but then the op amp's got to be lifting that. I think that op amp should be at 0 volts. I assume the other one would be. If there's 5 volt coming out of the regulator, I guess it must be. Yeah, that one's putting out nothing, or 0.005 volts. Whereas that's 0.27 volts. So I wonder what would be causing that. Might be something to investigate. But for the time being, at least the work of this is going again. I did manage to get a couple of these, or yeah, two on the top and one on the bottom screws out of this front panel part, just by the bit that was sticking through on the other side after I ground the head off was actually in good condition. So I just grabbed it with a big pair of like these electricians side cutters and just bit into the thread and twisted it and got them out. There was only that one that wouldn't come. I think they end up chewing the whole end of the screw off or cutting it off. It just was attached a bit better than the other ones. So I can put some screws back in. I'll see if that cleans up, I guess. Even though it's only the bottom, so it's not that important, but if I get as much muck off this thing as possible. And I've got the other cover here somewhere. Lots of corrosion on the inside, but nobody sees that. And a few bits of black missing where I hit it with a grinder. I think that's actually some sort of vinyl coating or something. It's got a very thick sort of paper. Yeah, no, it's like a plastic. I guess it's a what's that melt-on plastic stuff? It's kind of like a powder coating. Maybe it is actual proper powder coating, but it is like a powdered plastic. You heat the metal up and then apply it. But yeah, the back's actually bubbling up a bit. There's so much corrosion there. And yeah, I didn't manage to get those back screws out. So now is that panel meant to be? Yeah, it is. The panels go inside these bits, interestingly. But yeah, that looks half respectable. In black and white. Got a bit of a hole where the switch was removed. And I just got a bit of spray on there. And we've got a slight variance in the voltage, so I might have a quick look at that circuit again. But that's enough for now. And yeah, I'll get some screws in and might even have to spray a bit of black paint on there. Might do just a... You could even go the old pen on it or something, the old Sharpie. But that might need a bit of rust cleaning off there, but I mean that's good enough. If it was on a shelf or something, you're not really going to see the rest of it anyway. So it's looking a lot better than it was, and at least I've got a little dual tracking supply if I ever get around to fiddling around with any op-amp circuits or anything, which one day maybe. A lot of that stuff's on the back burner and probably never happen, but it'd be nice to get to it one day. And I might just have to re-drill these holes. But that came up, compared to what it was, it's come up pretty well. And yeah, a lot neater inside than all that wiring. We've got our mains wiring's all sort of got a bit of a gap. The only thing I haven't done here is I've got to tidy this LED up a bit. I might swing those wires across, cable tie them over to these other ones. It really ideally wants heat shrink putting on that resistor and stuff, but I think if I just simply cable tie this back over this way to keep it away from the mains wiring to that switch, then you've got good separation there. I always worry a little bit about silly things like that. If one of these fell off or something, it could drop down, but they're now insulated anyway, so that's another reason to insulate them. And we've got a bit of a decent gap there between 240 volts and our low voltage. There's no way we want anything like that coming out to the area that people are fiddling with. And yeah, the rest of this is tidied up. I did leave some of the original wiring there, but at least we've now got more red wires to the positive regulator and black wires to the negative one, and the same to the sockets on the front. Makes it just that bit neater and easier to understand what you're actually looking at. Probably could put another cable tie down there somewhere, but that's probably going overboard. It's not like these things are subject to mechanical interference or anything pushing on them, but I guess, you know, even just moving these things around, things do tend to move a bit. But I like that a lot better. We got rid of that terminal block completely. So the mains is all just wired to the points that it's going to. And that should keep it going. I haven't cleaned up these back heat sinks. They could really do with a bit more of a clean. I did brush the cobwebs off them. Some of the cobwebs, there's still a bit of a lump of something in there. But I might have to give those a bit of a proper wipe, maybe a scrub with a toothbrush or something, just to get the dirt off them would be nice. There's that old binding paste, which I doubt will ever be used because it's only like earth to the chassis. Back screws are a bit rusty, wouldn't need to paint them, I guess. And really that writing could be wiped off, and the details of what it is, ideally you would have just wrote them inside the front top cover or whatever, and in the back panel or bottom cover even, but just the top one would do, just to let you know what that is. Okay, so I had a quick look at the circuit of this thing. It's this lower op amp, and there's this 0.4 volt difference, or 0.2 something I think it is, not on the output, just on the chip itself, but it's on this output pin and back into this input pin that it's connected to, the inverting input by the look of it. And so I disconnected the actual ground pin of this regulator, which was the only other real possible source of it, and it's still the same. So what I thought I'd do is I'd swap the chips over and just change them in the socket here, top to bottom. But interestingly, when I do that, we do get back to nearly at 5 volts. Of course, we're on the negative rail, I'll get down to 5.15 volts, which is a bit better. But interestingly, the other rail doesn't regulate at all. Yeah, when you turn it on, goes up to the 418 volts on the positive one. And yeah, nearly perfect on the negative one at minimum voltage. But it looks like if you actually turn the pot on this, it's strangely, last time it goes almost in reverse. So maybe something's wrong with that, and then it doesn't do anything. Maybe it starts rising again when the... No. So I wonder if that possibly has something to do, either that chip's always been faulty, but it works almost fine in the bottom position, it just doesn't go to full, right down to 5 volts, doesn't track quite as well. It's got that like about 0.4 volts difference. So I think it looks like the camera failed to record where I found that little link, or little solder bridge. I'm trying to remember where it actually was now. I think it was around this orange wire, so it was on that chip. I was either there to that line, or I think that's where it was. From memory, I reckon it must have done some damage to that chip, but strangely it still worked in its normal position. But I've tried a different chip in that bottom position, doesn't get it to exactly 5 volts, it's always at that 0.15 thing. But if I get rid of that top chip, and I should have another one, thankfully I've still got some spares of these things. And these sockets, they don't like going in very well. You've got to be super careful, not the best IC sockets I've ever seen. If you're not careful, the pins don't actually go in the metal bits, they sort of go down the side of them or something, which I don't think I've ever had happen before. If I put that one in there, we should find everything's back to normal again. Yeah, we've got 5 volts. Oh, you're kidding me. 5 to 14.8. Oh, that's interesting. Well, that's actually what it's meant to do. So now there's only 0.15 volts difference here by the look of it, but it actually only goes up to 15 volts now, which is what this whole power supply was meant to do. So it must have been faulty from the beginning, because it used to go up to 17, 18 volts. Maybe even 19 volts. So that's very interesting. So we've got 5.15 and 5.0 exactly, so you can't really complain about that slight difference. So I guess that's 10.15 between them. And yeah, that's interesting. We've now got the proper range. I thought maybe when they said 5 to 15 volts they weren't being that picky about it, it actually went a bit higher, but Oh, well, there you go. So it is 5 to 14.8 volts and 14.9. Well, that's pretty much on 15, so it's 15 on one side and 5 on the other, and slightly out otherwise. But so it looks like that little 741 op amp's a dead one. So we'll get rid of that and chuck it in the rubbish. And I've still got to put a mains plug on there and maybe cut that cord a bit shorter, but that's it. It's finally actually going. But yeah, the intermittent problem in it was some little bit of solder hanging off. And interestingly, it wasn't where I'd touched anything. Although I had touched that, I did take a wire off that pad there, but I don't know how that would have got up a couple of tracks across. But you never know, when I pulled the wire off, something might have flicked or something. Certainly not impossible with the amount of solder and the way the big thick wires out on some of this stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty sure this power supply, when I initially looked at it, went above the 15 volts. So maybe there's been a iffy op amp in there for a while. But anyway, it seems to be a go now. The meter's all behaving itself, it seems. I've just got to put some screws back in, re-drill a few holes so that I can screw it all back together properly, and yeah, fix up this awful mains plug. That's just going to get the snip and go in the rubbish. And we've got about 2.5 meters, maybe 3 meters almost of, probably is getting close to 3 meters of cable on this thing, so we don't need that much. In most cases you only want, you know, even half a meter, 500 or something. That sort of length is plenty, because you don't normally have these things moving around. So that got that sorted out. And that's most of what came out of it. So I cleared quite a bit of stuff out. 3 switches, 3 binding posts, an LED, some unnecessary chocky blocks, and that extra bit that went on the pot there. So that should do that one. Thanks for watching.